The market structure of monopolistic competition provides a description of many modern industries. The first characteristic is a relatively large number of firms. Rather than the thousands of perfectly competitive firms in monopolistic competition, there are perhaps dozens, each with a fairly small share of the total market. Another characteristic is differentiated products. This characteristic makes monopolistic competition stand out as different from the perfectly competitive market structure and gives firms their ability to set the price above the competitive level. Easy entry and exit. There are very few barriers to entry in monopolistic competition, perhaps the largest being the need to provide sufficient marketing to differentiate a new firm's product from that of the existing rivals. The market for shoes closely fits the description of monopolistic competition. While all shoes serve the same basic purpose to cover and protect the feet, a running shoe, a hiking boot, and a flip-flop are very different and are made by many firms in the global market. Like the monopoly, the firm in monopolistic competition faces a downward sloping demand curve for its differentiated product. Because there are many similar substitutes available to consumers, the demand is fairly elastic. Because easy entry of competitors drives profits down to break-even levels, monopolistically competitive firms typically engage in extensive amounts of advertising to slow down and even reverse declining market share. Okay, I'm done.
Monopoly, a game many of you have played. Structural characteristics of Monopoly. The first thing about Monopoly is that there is a single producer. It's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to explain it. But a strict definition of monopoly requires that there are no other firms in the industry. There are no close substitutes. Customers just cannot find similar products in other markets. Barriers to entry. There are barriers to entry. A lot of barriers to entry. Market power. This is the result of the first three characteristics. Those were all of them that I said except for barriers to entry. With no competition and barriers to entry, the unregulated monopolist has market power, or monopoly price-setting ability. Again, it is rare to find a firm that satisfies all of the characteristics of monopoly, but the De Beers firm holds a near monopoly on global diamond production. The only gas station or bank in a small town might also act as a local monopolist. But the story of De Beers is actually very interesting. De Beers, it's a corporation that was created by all of the, it's a conglomerate of all of the different diamond producers in the world, and they realized that originally diamonds could just be found in small amounts, but then they found these massive mines in Africa. So they said, this is the amount of diamonds, like the influx into the market, would completely reduce all power they had. They would just be semi-precious stones. So what they did was they marketed them to the United States as a diamond, in an engagement ring, and they made that whole thing important. But diamonds are completely, they're not even precious stones. They're semi-precious at best. And so if you have an engagement ring that has a diamond on it, you've been played. Just saying. That's all I have. Barriers to entry. This is the segment on barriers to entry. If there were no barriers to entry, a monopolist earning positive economic profits would be history, and this segment would be done. Ayo! So before moving on to the behavior of monopoly, let's talk a little more about this necessary condition for the existence of a monopoly. Legal barriers. In your local television market, only one firm is given the right to broadcast on a specific frequency. There might be only one firm given the right to sell liquor or liqueur in a small community. There are patents, trademarks, and copyright laws to protect inventions and intellectual property. In a movie popular with 14-year-old boys everywhere, Carmen Electra was recently given the sole right to the internet address bearing her name. I'm not sure what movie that is personally, but I'm sure I just missed it by 4 years. Anyways, these legal protections do not provide for absolute monopoly, for there are often viable substitutes available to consumers. There you have it. Economies of scale is the next part in the segment. In our last episode, this concept was introduced. As a firm grows larger in the long run, average total costs fall, providing the larger firm a cost advantage over smaller firms. If extensive economies of scale exist, an industry could evolve into one with only one enormous producer. A natural monopoly is a case where economies of scale are so extensive that it is less costly for one firm to supply the entire range of demand. Power plants, electrical companies, those are good examples. Segment 3. Control of key resources. If a firm controlled most of the available resources in the production of a good, it would be very difficult for a competitor to enter the market. For example, if a producer of granulated sugar wanted to monopolize the market, the firm might wish to control all of the sugarcane plantations, or all of the plants that granulize the sugar.
Perfect competition. Structural characteristics of perfect competition. Each market structure is defined by structural characteristics. These characteristics determine, among other things, how the profit-maximizing price and quantity are set in the short run, as well as how profits might be maintained in the long run. Perfect competition is typically described by 4 characteristics. Many small independent producers and consumers. Not small, like mini-me small, but small, like each firm is too small to have an impact on market price. No one firm can drive up the price by restricting supply, or drive down the price by flooding the market with output. No one consumer can, by changing the amount of the good that he consumes, impact the price. Firms produce a standardized product. There exist no real differences between one firm's output and the next. No barriers to entry or exit. There exist no significant obstacles to the entry of new firms into or the exit of existing firms out of this industry. Profitability, or lack thereof, determines whether the industry is expanding or contracting. Firms are price takers. This characteristic is actually a result of the first 3. Because all firms are too small to affect the price, remember, not mini-me small, they must accept the market price and produce as much as they wish at that price. Even if they could change the price, they would not do so. To see this, suppose that the market determined competitive price of barley is $5. If farmer Katie increased the price to $5.01, she would now be the high-price supplier of barley, with thousands of competitors producing an identical product at a lower price. Katie is likely to lose all of her customers. If she lowers her price to $4.99, she would seemingly clean up her competition. But remember, the price-taking characteristic tells us that Katie can sell all she wants at the market price of $5. If you can sell at what you want at $5, why would Katie sell even one unit at $4.99? All 4 of the characteristics of perfect competition are rarely found in today's industries, but agricultural commodities are usually regarded as approximately perfect competition.
Oligopoly. Oligopoly markets are typically further from perfect competition than the monopolistic market structure, although there is no one model of oligopoly. A couple of oligopoly models are presented, but keep in mind that if one little assumption is relaxed, the predictions of the model can be radically different. Structural characteristics. I'm going to go with you through the structural characteristics. You can see from the characteristics that oligopoly shares more common ground with a monopoly, but these are flexible enough to describe many different and diverse industries. Many. A few large producers. Can it get more vague than this? No. Think of the American auto industry with the big three producers, or the tobacco industry, also dominated by three huge firms. Three. Or think of the Catholic faith, dominated by three semi-gods. If the distribution of market share in an industry is top-heavy, with a few large firms, the industry is described as oligopolistic. Differentiated or standardized product. Oligopoly industries can come in both flavors. Crude oil is a fairly standard product, but it is very much an oligopoly of large producers. Automobiles, beers, and soft drinks are also oligopoly markets, but with more differentiated products. For example, I might not like a very yeasty beer, so I'd get one that's not as yeasty. Or, I like the hops. I get very hoppy beer. Entry barriers. If these industries are fairly easy to enter, we would not see them dominated by a few huge producers. So, if they weren't fairly easy to enter, then we would see them dominated by a few huge producers. That's the corollary. Mutual independence. Because a few large producers control these industries, the action of one firm, price setting or advertising, is likely to affect the others and prompt a response. A good example of this is your local gasoline market, or your local gas station as you might call it. This is very much an oligopoly. When one gas station lowers prices by 1 cent per gallon, the others usually quickly follow.